Daily Derech. We are walking the path of holiness.
Hello, everybody. This is Rabbi Marcus Rubenstein. Welcome to the Daily Derech, a special project of exploring Judaism, the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, and the Rabbinical Assembly. Today is the fourth day after Shabbat Kodesh, the 12th of Iyar, 5786, corresponding in the secular calendar to Wednesday, April 29th, 2026. We will read Parashat Emor this coming Shabbat, and it is the 27th day of the Omer. Let's begin. Mishnah Torah. We'll continue learning the foundations of the Torah today. We're in chapter 5 still, learning about the laws of what can we lose our life over? What can we give our life up over? What are we allowed to? What transgressions are we allowed to do in order to save our life? And that's what we've been discussing this week so far. So in Halacha 6, we're given the particular principle about what happens in terms of being sick. If you get sick, and the only way to heal is to do a transgression. Let's say you need to have a certain medicine that has pork in it or something like that, or whatever it is that violates a mitzvah of the Torah in order to save your life. The answer is yes. You can transgress basically any mitzvah in the Torah in order to save your life when you're sick, except for the cardinal 3. Right, the cardinal 3, if you've been listening to in the past, but we'll review today, of course, in case you haven't, is bloodshed, sexual sins, or idolatry. Right, if you are sick and the only way to heal from the sickness is by doing idolatry, is by killing somebody, or by doing a sexual sin, we must possibly die from the sickness and not transgress. But the really interesting part here comes at the point of what about the punishment afterwards, right? So we know that it is forbidden to do so, but what happens if you do it anyway? And specifically, we're talking in the case of the 3 cardinal sins. So let's say you only can get better, the doctor says, if you kill this person, okay? Not that I know of where this exists, but let's say that was the example. And obviously the Torah would tell you can't kill this person. You have to suffer from the sickness and possibly die from it rather than killing somebody else. Your blood is not redder than anyone else's, as they might say. But you violate this mitzvah. Instead, you violate this halacha. Instead, you kill this person to save yourself from the sickness. In this particular case, the Rambam says that you are still punished by earthly courts because of this. Now, if you were remembering from a previous session that we spoke, back in halacha 4, 2 halachot before, we actually said the opposite halacha. In a case not where you're sick, but where you're being coerced by somebody else to do one of these 3 cardinal transgressions or be killed by this person, we are told by the Torah that you cannot and you have to die from this person. You can't do this cardinal sin, but you do the cardinal sin. We are actually told that you can't be punished by an earthly court. But yet in this particular halacha, when it has to do with being sick, we have a different halacha conclusion that you can be punished by an earthly court. So that brings up the obvious question of why does it seem like there are 2 different halachot or 2 different legal outcomes when the cases seem very, very similar? In order to understand this, we actually have to go deeper. We have to look at the commentary tradition on the Rambam. Probably the most famous answer to this question in the tradition comes from the Or Sameach. The Or Sameach was a great commentator and innovator on the Rambam. He wrote a book called the Or Sameach. We call him by his book's name. It's a very, very beautiful, very hard sefer, but very, very beautiful sefer, and working a lot on these problems of when the Rambam seems to disagree with himself. And so the creative answer that the Or Sameach comes up with really has to do around how is this transgression happening? What is the source of this sort of pressure that a Jew is put under? In the case of one of them, right, another person is coercing you into this, right? There is a bad guy who is coercing you under the pain of death to do something that is forbidden by the Torah as a cardinal sin, right? So you're being coerced by somebody else, by another agent. And so in that case, the Torah, the rabbis tell us that we can't punish this person in an earthly court, even if they do the cardinal sin in order to save their life because they're being coerced by somebody else. In the case of sickness, you might think too that it is still coercion, right? The person doesn't necessarily want to kill somebody or do a sexual sin or idolatry, but they do want to save their life. They don't want to die from the sickness. So you might at first thought say, well, this is coercion, right? Just in the same way. But according to the Or Sameach, we actually see this differently. That the rabbis say that because the sickness doesn't come from anywhere, there is no one who's causing you to be sick, and causing you to be sick for the specific purpose to make you do a transgression. It actually cannot be considered coercion in the eyes of the law because, well, there's no one actually coercing you. It's just a thing that just naturally just happens sometimes. And all it is about saving our own life. It's not actually about being forced by anyone else. And because of that slight difference, we therefore, the earthly court, the Beit Din, has an obligation, therefore, to punish the person who does this cardinal act of sin. And even though it seems very similar to other cases, and I think it has to do with this slight difference in it's a little bit of a different situation when there's another person in the world coercing you to do a transgression specifically in order to violate the Torah, right? And to violate the Torah for this person according to this person's will versus it's no one's will that you be that sick. It's no one's will that happens to you. But it's just something that's happening to you. You have a different level of responsibility and a different level of punishment if you act wrong in this case. Mishnah Torah. We're on chapter 5 of Foundations of Torah. We are going to do the 8th halacha today. We've been talking about times when we can violate the laws of the Torah in order to save our life. And when can we do this? When can we not do this? We talked in the past about coercion from anti-Semites. This case today, we're going to talk about sickness. And specifically, you need something because you're sick from something. And can you break halacha? Can you use, and the medicine that is required is either unkosher, or it is a prohibition in some regard. So we're told that in cases when there's a danger to our lives, we're allowed to even eat things that are prohibited or use things that are prohibited by the Torah. So, for example, eating chametz on Pesach or eating on Yom Kippur or eating an unkosher animal, all these things would be considered permitted in terms of a life-threatening sickness. But actually, the Rambam even goes further and offers a further leniency. And I think this leniency is actually very important for us and important to know. That even in cases where we aren't under life-threatening, where our life is necessarily threatened, but we could really use something, it would make us feel better, it would heal us in some way, it would make our lives more comfortable, everything like this, then, according to the Rambam here, we still can use something that is not considered kosher. But there's a caveat, specifically in a way in which we don't benefit from it in the moment. So what's really being said here is that when, let's say you eat on Yom Kippur, right? You might have to eat on Yom Kippur because you need it for your body, your life is threatened, and everything like that. So in that case, you need to eat on Yom Kippur. But let's say your life isn't threatened. Let's say, it just makes you more comfortable when you're able to eat on Yom Kippur and you feel better, and everything like this, or everything like this. Can you then still eat on Yom Kippur or eat in a particular way? And this isn't, by the way, about like, oh, I'm just happen to be hungry right now. This is like I get sick from this. Then what the Rambam surprisingly says here is that you actually can use something. You can use a non-kosher product or something that would violate halacha by using it normally for healing, even in cases when there is no damage, but only in a case when you don't benefit from it immediately. So, for example, eating, right? You benefit from immediately. But that's only if you eat something good. What happens if you eat something that's disgusting tasting, like Pepto-Bismol or something like that, right? No one, and people don't enjoy Pepto-Bismol. It's an experience people don't appreciate. That's what the Rambam's talking about here, of using something in a way that one doesn't benefit from it in the moment, right? Even though it does heal you in the end, that you don't actually derive satisfaction from using this thing. So in those cases, we can actually do this. So some of the examples that the Rambam brings is like using a bandage that is made out of chametz, right, on Pesach, right? It would be usually considered forbidden for us to benefit from chametz on Pesach, according to the Torah. But we can use it in this case because, again, when you put a bandage on your arm, it doesn't actually make you feel better in the moment, unless you're my children. But regardless, for the most part, it helps in the healing process over time. But in the moment, it is not satisfying in that way. And so in that case, and I think that really does free us up to use solutions that heal our bodies, even in cases that are not life-threatening, if we're doing it in a way that doesn't provide any satisfaction at the moment. I also think that this is a bigger idea in terms of how we think about what the Torah is trying to prevent in the first place. What the Torah seems to be trying to prevent is using something that's prohibited because you want to enjoy it, because even the slightest chance that you're going to use this prohibited item because you are going to get satisfaction from using it, that's what the Torah is trying to prevent. And it seems like the according to the rabbis, that really what matters here is, and what the Torah is trying to prevent is using doesn't care about as much or isn't as sensitive to, are times when we're using an item to just heal our bodies and not getting any satisfaction. If we're really just doing it to heal our bodies, and we're 100% sure that is the reason we're doing it, we're not trying to rationalize it, we're not trying to do it anyway, it would make sense according to the logic of the rabbis that we should be able to use it. And I think what the rabbis are trying to do here through the language of the Rambam is just to try to create clear categories that we as human beings can use, right? It's so easy to rationalize this. And I think to ask yourself, am I satisfied by doing this in any way in the moment, even if it's tertiary reasons, or that's the 10th reason you're doing it, even if it's even a little bit, it would be considered something that we can't break because of that reason. And I think that shows how important it is that we don't put our own satisfaction first, but rather we put the Torah's laws first. And that is really important, I think, key into being a Jew and being a person connected to God and observing the Torah. Menorat HaMaor. We'll continue learning the introduction today, and we're going to continue talking about the nature of aggadah, the nature of the stories of the Talmud that makes up this book, Menorat HaMaor, and I think obviously is a bigger symbol towards what is the usefulness of extra halachic material throughout Judaism, things that don't necessarily dictate specifically what we need to do at every moment, but are more general and theological, philosophical in this regard. So Rabbi Yeshua says about this in Midrash Tehillim, this is Midrash Tehillim 28:5, that there is a line in the Tanakh that says, Ki lo yavinu et pulat Hashem. They don't understand the actions of God. And so what is this verse mean according to Rabbi Yeshua? He says, this is in reference to aggadot, or stories, ethical, extra halachic material from the rabbis, are called pulat Hashem, or the actions, the works of God. And why are they this teaches that he says that anyone who does not study them in order to settle and expound them, right, to understand them. And I love that it's not just study them to just understand them, just to read through them, but you have to settle them, right? You have to yeshuv them, right? You have to, which means in Jewish language here in Hebrew, it really means that one actually has to settle them, and they actually have to make sure to solve the problems that is found within them. And this is very, very important, right? So if you see a aggadah that where one part is conflicting with the other, we have to solve the problems where the aggadah doesn't seem to be talking to itself or in line with itself, and that helps us to understand and unlock the mysteries of the aggadot, and also to explicate them, l'darsham, which means to expand on them, right? So that they can actually affect us and apply to our lives and apply that moment in their lives. So those who are not doing those two things, it's this pasuk is said about them. This verse is said about them. Ki lo yavinu et pulat Hashem. They don't understand the actions of God. And so I think that's really big, right? If you really want to understand how God acts in the world, what we're told by Rabbi Yeshua here is that we need to expound and we need to really analyze the aggadot of the Talmud. And those who haven't done that really haven't seen that yet. Very important. Now is the even more famous one that he brings next. This piece is from Sifrei Parashat Ekev. It's the halachic midrash on the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy says in chapter 8:3, not by bread alone shall man live, but by the words that come from the Lord's mouth. That's what it says in Deuteronomy 8:3. Sifrei reacts to that and said, these are halachot and aggadot. What does it mean by that? And there it says, and what does it mean by that? It's not by bread alone. What's bread from the last time is Torah, is halacha, right? The bread, according to, if you were listening last session, is usually allegorized towards halacha, right? The things that actually sustain our body and give us the energy, the sort of the raw food is halacha, right? What God actually commands us to do. Very important. But this verse says not by bread alone, but rather by everything that proceeds from the mouth of the Lord. What are the things that proceed from the mouth of the Lord? That is aggadah, which is amazing to say that these are words that actually spring out of God's mouth. That's what these aggadot are. That's how close they are to Hashem. That's a pretty high compliment for aggadot. And then the most famous line, do you wish to recognize him who spoke and the world came into being? Learn aggadah, for through it you will come to recognize him and to cleave to his ways. So there is a basic prescription here of what it's being said. If you really want to know God, if you really want to connect to God and recognize God in your life and try to copy God's ways in which God acts in the world, because remember, we're already told that the aggadot are pulat Hashem. They're the actions of God. Then we have to learn aggadah. We have to analyze them. We have to drash them. We have to bring them into our moment. And in doing so, we can draw much closer to Hashem. We can recognize God in our lives. And of course, we can cleave to God and we can connect to God and by doing what God does, right? This is the rabbinic way of fulfilling the mitzvah to cleave to Hashem, right? We know there's a famous aggadah that's not quoted here. It says, God is a all-consuming fire. How could you cling in the Torah? The Torah tells us to cling to Hashem, to connect to Hashem. And the rabbis ask, how can you cling to Hashem? How can you cling to Hashem if he's this all-consuming fire? It's like touching fire. That would be a problem. And they said it's by copying his ways. It's by doing what God does. So just as God visits the sick, so too we should visit the sick, right? And so too, just as God gives to the poor and lifts up the fallen, so too we should give to the poor and lift up the fallen, right? We actually become closer to God by being like God. And we learn how to be like God or how to be godly through learning of these aggadot, which again is another reason why we're focusing on them so much and why I honestly find them really, really beautiful and an important part of everyone's Jewish spirituality. Well, that's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Daily Derech. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to email me anytime at rmr@templeofaaron.org. Thank you so much for listening. There are so many people to thank, and you can look in the show notes for that. And also, if you want to know and see any of these texts in the original, we actually have that too. You can actually find that in our episode description. So look in each of the episode descriptions and you'll find that information right there. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.